Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 14th annual Apapa Voters Forum. Please rise for the U.S. Marine Corps.
Can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave Peru to the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave for the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our How to Get Involved and Make a Difference panel, moderated by Miss Jackie Nguyen.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. How is everyone doing today? Come on, let's start one more time. Good afternoon, everyone. How is everyone doing today? Wonderful. That's the enthusiasm that I would like to hear. Good afternoon. My name is Jackie Nguyen. I am the director of the Asian Pacific American Outreach for the California Senate Republican Caucus. And I also dabble in press as the press secretary for the Senate Republican Caucus as well. I would like to say it's an honor for me to be here this afternoon. To my right here, I would like to introduce you to CeCe Yin. We all know who Mr. CeCe Yin is, but just to make sure, he is the founder and chairman of APAPA. And then to my left here, we have Ms. Mariko Yamada. Please give her a warm round of applause. As well as Ms. Wilma Chan. Both of these wonderful ladies once served in our California State Assembly. So let's start with our first panel here. We're going to break it up in 2 sessions, 15 minutes, and so each of our panelists will have about a minute to respond. I would like to kick it off here. This first panel is how to get involved and make a difference. And before we proceed, I just want to say that it's amazing to see the young faces out there in the crowd. So many young faces, students as well as parents, Asian Americans in our community. I'm very proud to see that and to know that, you know, in the year 2055, Asian Americans are supposed to be surpassing Latinos here in the United States by 36%. That means our API community has a huge stake and has opportunities to be in politics as well as helping to vote those into politics. So let's first kick off our panel here. The first question I'm going to ask is for CeCe. It's going to be a 2-part question here. First of all, why is it important to get out there and vote, Mr. Yin?
Well, this $1 million question, and in democratic system, especially Americans, the founding principle that the government, the country belong to individuals, every person of this country as citizens. How that works? That means this only opportunity we have, or rights everybody has, is one vote. And that also translates into a duty for us, not just say, I want to vote, but I have responsibility to make sure that the government, the people, and the policies that we elect and set are reflection of my personal and my family and the values and the principles.
Absolutely, that was great. And then the second part is, you know, what else can citizens do in addition to voting to making a difference here?
Well, citizens, since you own the government, people like Wilma and Mariko, many elected officials actually work for you. You pay them. You pay them 2 things. One, you pay them the honor, the trust you give to them. That's great honor that you trust them to make decisions for you. That's for your lives sometimes, for your success or failures. And that's big trust. That's great value to them. Secondly, you pay their salaries. Everything to do, the family, you pay them. Direct. Therefore, you make sure you elect the right person that reflect, understands you. And secondly, make sure they do a good job for you.
I think you brought up a very good point there, Mr. Yin, that, you know, a lot of these elected officials, you know, that when they are in office, you know, the trust and the integrity of the office there. You brought up a very good point, and, you know, the people there are voting for these individuals in office. Let's kick it off here with Ms. Yamada over here in regards to that. When you were in office, back in 2006 to, 2008 to 2014 in California State Assembly. How did you serve that office with integrity here?
Well, thank you. First, I want to thank the 14th Annual APAPA Voters Forum for inviting us, and really want to congratulate you on continuing this event every year. It's grown and has evolved and has been just one of the keystones of Asian Pacific American political and public affairs participation. So I just wanted to say that at the beginning. I came into office in one of the most difficult times facing our state and our country. And I think more than ever, people are hungry for honesty and integrity in public service. There are many breaches to that public trust, and I think it's really incumbent on those of us that both present ourselves for public office as well as serve in public office to try to daily maintain a certain code of ethics. I know that that's very difficult to imagine that there could be a code of ethics or a certain way for people to comport themselves in public office. But I do think that presenting yourself for an office means that you are willing to stand up to the kind of scrutiny, the bright lights, and to pretty much put yourself forward transparently and do what you say you're going to do. I think that there's a lot of distrust and disappointment in public officials, and I think that's something that I've always tried to do, to maintain a sense of belief that we are really there to serve you.
Absolutely, that was great. And before we kick off here to Ms. Wilma Chan, if I can just follow up with you here, Mariko. How did you calculate your chances in terms of running, and why did you decide to run?
Well, that question, the word calculate, I think it's different for different people. My first race was actually more of a sprint race. I was not planning to run for office. Came about following the most chaotic time in California government after the recall of our governor, Gray Davis. I was called upon by the governor to fill in a vacant position on the Board of Supervisors. So my first foray into elected office was really as a result of an appointment. The more compelling story is when I chose to run for the California State Assembly in 2008. I wasn't planning to do that. There was an opponent who was pretty much presenting himself as the heir apparent to the seat. He had $500,000 in the bank. I had $10,000 in the bank. But I didn't want him to be the only choice. And so if you were to say calculation, it was not the formulaic, target book analysis. Do you have enough money? Do you have enough endorsements? Do you have the right consultants, the right handlers to win? I chose to run and then kind of got the infrastructure later. And we were not expected to win, but we did win, and I'm very proud to have had the support of many in this room in that endeavor. So I think, again, going back to my earlier answer about people being hungry for authenticity, I think people want to support those who they can honestly feel they have a connection with. And you don't get that by mail, TV ads, phone calls. You get that by direct person-to-person contact.
So perhaps the better word is, instead of calculating, it was more perseverance then that you won in that race.
Well, win or lose, I think it's always important, you make your decision to run. Sometimes you change during the course of that decision-making process, but I think my family and my closest friends and my strongest supporters know that once I make up my mind, there's really nothing that changes, that course. I mean, it would have to be something very, very compelling for me to reverse course. Once I make a commitment to present myself either for an office or on a project or an issue, I'm kind of known just since playground days to not back down.
Wonderful. Well, then the next couple questions. Let's go with the next couple questions to Ms. Wilma Chan here. She's currently serving in the Board of Supervisors for Alameda County. So the first question is, in your experiences running for office, what roles did volunteers play in helping you get elected?
Well, we have a lot of great volunteers out here. I don't think anyone can really win a race without grassroots support. As CC said, it's voters. A lot of times in politics, you look at money and you look at endorsements, but at the end of the day, people have to come out and vote for you. The people will come out and vote for you if you have volunteers who know the people, who you've met in social clubs, who you've met in politics, who you've met at church, wherever you've met them. I've had volunteers. I've run for office 9 times, and I won 8 of them. It's very interesting to lose one, but anyway, I've won 8 of them since 1990. And we've had volunteers who hand addressed 2,000 pieces of mail, put the stamps on them. And people notice that. Would you open a letter that was just hand typed and just had a, that regular postmark on it, or would you rather open a letter that was hand addressed to you, that had a real stamp on it, that you know that someone supported that candidate, and that's how you got that piece of mail? So I think volunteers are really key to winning any election, just like they're really key to the success of this event today.
And I think also volunteers, when I was volunteering on a few campaigns there prior to jumping into politics and working on a congressional race down in San Diego, I think it also inspires the volunteers because you get to kind of rub elbows with the candidate, as well as, you can go home and you can share your experiences with your family. How would you feel in regards to, when, you're interacting with volunteers in the office there?
Well, campaigns aren't always fun. There's some good days and there are some bad days. And the thing a lot of times that keeps the candidate going, and I'm sure Marika will agree, is the volunteers. Because they're there because they believe in you. They're not getting paid, They come in every night. They'll make phone calls for you. They'll put up signs for you. They'll walk for you. So when you have those bad days as a candidate, which you are bound to have those bad days, who's going to pick you up? It's your family and your volunteers. So they're very, very key, and I can't overemphasize how grateful candidates are for people who will give of their own time, their own money, their own resources because they believe in what you're doing, and that's very inspiring to candidates and very necessary.
Absolutely. And if I may kick this question over to Cece here to my right in regards to volunteers, Papa's your baby for the past 14 years. Next year, you're going to be celebrating the 15th year that Papa has been started under your leadership here. How do you feel in regards to seeing the sea of faces in the audience here, and so many of them are young people that you're sitting up here wondering, I want these young people to be volunteers and to help out. Doesn't matter what their political affiliation is. I want them to get involved. How does that make you feel?
Well, first, I'm not very old either. And so I feel young with younger. Today, look at here. This is America. You see the faces, you see the smile, you look at the way you look it up. This is the day that you said, I'm American, and this country, this government is mine. You decide who should be serving you. So that's what I feel about the volunteers now. Sioux Education, Papa, and many other organizations. We have 30 organizations more APIs together, plus NAACP, everybody else here is not just young people, but young people is our future. You're right. It's the best vote in the future. But everybody is equally important. So if we get voters, individuals, not just voters, feel they are important to their family, to themselves, to cast that vote, or get more vote out as volunteers, like Wilma said, get out the doors to get 10, 20, 100 votes. That's how PAPA is an education foundation, nonpartisan, non-political, ask every citizen or even non-citizens to actively engage to be a part of political process in America, and that we would build a better union, better country, more equal, more justice for all.
Wonderful. And you're right there, Mr. Yin. The folks out here in the audience are the faces of America here. So let me ask you this question, then we'll go over to these wonderful ladies here. What strategies or ideas can be implemented to get more ethnic minorities to vote? What are your thoughts in regards to that?
Say it again.
Oh, sure. What strategies or ideas can be implemented to get more minorities, ethnic minorities, to vote?
Well, I think two-part, my thought is, number one, that we individuals has to take total responsibility. We can't blame the government or elected officials or corporations or the past history that we do not want to actively engage in the process because they didn't treat us, they don't treat us right. No, that's own work. Because if you don't participate, go out to vote, get your friends to vote, get people run for offices that represent your ideals, your needs, your backgrounds, you will never get that right. So I'm saying so responsibility is falling on each one as me and you. The second part is we need to get organized so you can influence not 100, 1,000, a million people. So they can go out to share your views, your ideas, to build a better country.
Absolutely. Thank you so much there, Mr. C.C. Yin. And what about you, Ms. Yamada, in terms of strategies and ideas that can be implemented to get more ethnic minorities to get out there and vote?
Well, you know, I have a saying that's not original, but I'll share it with you. I don't quite remember the first time I heard it. But the saying is, if you're not at the table, you'll be on the menu, okay? If you're not, so remember, if you're not at the table, you'll be on the menu. And that's not just because my husband grew up in a Chinese restaurant, because he is Chinese, by the way.
The food.
What I wanted to say is that I consider voting, the privilege of voting, it's really a sacred honor. There are so many people that fought and died for this right to vote in this country. And around the world, the franchise is still not equal. But I'm just talking about in our own nation, how many people fought for and died for this right. There are also people who serve in the military today, or who have served in the military, that continue to fight and defend our nation's right to vote. So voting is, sort of to me a real sacred covenant with the foundational principles of our democracy. So how can we translate that into encouraging people to vote? We just got signed into law automatic voter registration, again, though tied to your driver's license or a state ID. So it's still not, available to everyone, but it's a step in the right direction. Now we have to figure out ways to make people feel included, that, how many times have you felt maybe that your vote didn't count? But your vote does count. Every single vote counts. And so I think that it is incumbent not only on political parties, but also community organizations such as the PAPA, who have done such a tremendous amount of work already, to reach out and make people feel included. No matter what, people want to be asked. Some of us who are political junkies, would never miss a vote. I mean, that's in fact how the pollsters and pundits figure out where to target mail. They send mail to what are called 5 out of 5 voters or 6 out of 6 voters. Have never missed a vote. But it's the people who don't vote regularly that we should analyze and ensure that we're reaching out and making civic engagement relevant to their daily lives. And I don't think that is just in one ethnic group or another. That's all kinds of voters. So, as a person that is seeking public office again next year, I would not take a single vote for granted. So that would be my answer.
Fantastic. Wonderful answer there. Thank you so much. And then we're going to go with our final question for our panelists. Let's start with Ms. Chan here. What advice would you give to someone out there who's thinking about running for office?
Okay, I also have a saying, which is, it's not who you are, it's what you do. We see a lot of people running for office today because they think it's going to make them famous, it's going to put them in the newspaper, it's going to be glamorous. And when you're in elected office, you hear a lot of praise, and some of it is actually false. People are going to come and shake your hand and all this. The the best advice I think I can give to anybody who wants to run for office is you have to do it for another reason than wanting those things. Most people who are successful in office are people who have a passion for something. It could be, for business, making sure that business does well in California. It could be for elderly, making sure that elderly in California are protected. It can be for our young people, making sure that there are good schools for every single child in California. It could be for health care. But there needs to be a reason, a compelling reason for you to run for office beyond that looks attractive, I want to be there. So that's the first thing. And it's really important because it's not that easy to run for office. And what's going to drive you through this, besides the volunteers and the support you get, is your mission, the reason why you're doing it. Otherwise, you're really not going to make it. Or if you make it, you're not going to be very good at your job. And I think one thing about Asian Americans, we like to excel at what we do. And excelling means we have to do a good job while we're in office. We have to represent our communities well. We have to represent our constituents well. So if I just leave you with one thing, just remember again, it's not who you are, it's what you do.
Great advice there. Thank you. And you, Ms. Yamada?
Well, I certainly don't want this panel to just, be remembered with certain glib phrases, but I do have another phrase for, an answer to this question. I think when you choose to run for public office, you have to have the heart of a lion and the height of a rhinoceros. Because it, just as Wilma just said, it is not an easy path to take. But I'm looking around the room here, and I would say that there are people here in this audience that probably should consider running for office. If you haven't considered it before, sometimes you look around and say, hey, it's not me. But it might be you, because just as Wilma said, you have to have a passion for an issue, area of expertise, a problem that you wish to share your knowledge about in order to solve. You look around and say, hey, I could do that. And I think that definitely looking back at my 41 years in public service, starting in Los Angeles County in 1974, there were only a handful of APIs that were even working in the public sector, in the political sector. We used to have a small group called the Asian Lunch Bunch. That's how many of us there were. We would get together once a month for dim sum to commiserate and to support one another, because there weren't very many of us around. Now you look at the California State Capitol, just as one example. There are over 100 plus API Capital staffers. We have been in this country for hundreds of years. We have a right to be here. We have compelling information to share and talents to bring to bear to solve some of California's and United States' biggest problems. We shouldn't be the first of. We should only be, the beginning of. And I just say, if you have a passion for solving problems for the common good, you could be a candidate as well. And I would encourage you to seek that out.
Great. Thank you so much. That was wonderful here. Aren't these panelists wonderful? Ladies and gentlemen, let's give them a warm round of applause here as we conclude the first part of panel one. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Susie. Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Chan. Okay, I think we're going to continue on with the second part of our panel here. Let's welcome. Gentlemen, welcome to the stage. Hello. Hello. Nice to... Oh. Whatever you would decide. Thank you. You gentlemen sit over there. Isn't this a great photo opportunity with me and this gentleman over here? Our height difference. Let's all have a seat here, gentlemen. So this is the second part of the first panel in regards to how to get involved and make a difference. So to my right here is Mr. Steve Lee, Elk Grove City Council member. Please give him a warm round of applause. To my left here is Mr. Alan Warren, City Council member for the City of Sacramento. Please give him a warm round of applause. And finally, over here is Mr. Bassam Elkara, who's with CAR, and he also ran for the school board. Is that correct? Please give these three gentlemen a warm round of applause. Okay, so gentlemen, we're going to have 1 minute here. Let's start off with Mr. Lee here to my right. Why did you decide to run for office?
Very good question. If I can go back about 15 years, I was approached by a young man. Many of you know him as C.C. Yin. And he unveiled a concept that moved me. He talked about creating an organization that will be able to foster young people, young Asian Pacific Islanders, to look at the opportunities of public service. I joined that organization, and I was honored by being one of the founding board members. But not only that, after I left the board to go to law school, I thought about it, and I realized that everything that I learned in the organization is really the foundation to public service. And so I certainly am proud to say that I am a product of Apapa, in that I took it further and embraced it fully and ran for public office. But more, on another note, I started out as a young activist, and after years of asking the electeds, can you do this for our community, can you do that for our community, I just got frustrated because nothing was getting done. And so when I realized that instead of being reactive to the policies that are in place, why don't I be proactive and actually be in a position of power to make the decision?
Fantastic. So you got involved then because you felt like you had the need to get involved.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. And for you here, Mr. Warren, what did you decide to run? Why did you decide to run for office?
Well, great. Thank you very much. You know, for me to decide to run for city council was a very difficult decision because my wife and I, at the time, we had 3 young kids, and we were doing a lot of things trying to make preparations for our lives together, and we were actually not even living in Sacramento. We were living in one of the suburbs. But a number of leaders from District 2 had come to me and asked me to consider running for city council, and the stories that they would tell me were very compelling. I grew up in a part of Sacramento called Del Paso Heights. And Del Paso Heights, please. So the district that I represent now is, I believe, the most diverse district in the entire city of Sacramento. And most of you probably know that Sacramento is considered one of the most diverse cities in the entire country. But in that particular community of Del Paso Heights, no longer did there exist a full-service grocery store. There was no longer a bank in Del Paso Heights. There were no gas stations in Del Paso Heights. And so my wife, who is also from Del Paso Heights, we had a discussion, and we decided that we needed, not only did we need, it was really our obligation to come back home to try to do what we can. And I'm very proud to announce that the first new grocery store in Del Paso Heights will be opening later this month. The second one we will be announcing. There's another full-service grocery store that we'll be announcing next month. And then there's other good things to come. But it was really the fact that we wanted to continue to give back, and we thought that being elected into the city council was our best opportunity to really bring about some of these positive changes. So.
Wonderful. So I'm hearing 2 things here. Thank you so much there, Mr. Warren. 2 things here that I'm hearing. One is Mr. Lee here to my right said that, you know what? I'm not going to be satisfied with the answer that I'm given, and I want to jump in and help. So that's the first theme. And the second theme that I'm hearing here from you, Mr. Warren, is that you wanted to give back to your community. And therefore, that's why you ran and you're serving. And congratulations there on the businesses that are coming to Del Paso Heights. We look forward to seeing the grand opening celebration there. So let's go on to you here, sir, in regards to this question. You recently ran for, I believe, school board. And why did you decide to run?
So for me, it was one of the most difficult decisions to make because my wife was pregnant with twins, and she was due right around election time. And so, you know, I actually was hoping someone else would run that I could support. And I told them, I said, you know what, let's try to find a candidate from our community that I can support. I waited until Friday of the deadline to put my name on the ballot because I was hoping that someone else would throw their name on the ballot. They didn't, but for me it was personal. And the reason I joined the race was that I have 4 kids that are going to be in the school district. And this school district has, you know, it's the worst performing school district in the region. And so I said, if I'm going to stay in Natomas where I live, and I love my neighbors, I love the diversity, I didn't want to move to the suburbs. I wanted to stay, you know, in the city. I said, we're going to have to make a difference in the school board. And so that's when I decided, you know what, I gotta do this. It's gonna be a life changer, you know, especially with 4 young children. But I said the sacrifice is worth it because not only for my children, and anyone knows the work that I do, is I work on justice issues, civil rights issues, and education is the great equalizer. And so I said, every student deserves a great education. I grew up in San Francisco, and I went to one of the roughest high schools. And it was actually an API organization that helped me and other minorities get into UC Berkeley. So you see that when there's partnerships, when community works with schools, what can be achieved. So I felt that with my experience, that you know, I can help make a difference in Twin Rivers.
Absolutely. So then, here we have the theme here. You wanted to set a future up for your 4 young children. Mr. Warren here wanted to give back to his community. And Mr. Lee here said he wasn't satisfied with getting the answers. He wanted to get involved. Great answers, gentlemen. Thank you so much. So let's move on to the next question here. Let's start with you, sir. What mistakes did you make during your campaign? And what lessons did you learn from them?
So in a campaign, you can never walk enough. You have to walk, knock on doors. You can have as many volunteers as you want, but at the end of the day, you're the person who's going, the candidate is the person that's going to get the votes. And also, so I won on election day 75% of the vote, but I still lost the election. So, you know, at the end of the day, the election a lot of times now is going to be won with absentee votes. And so a lot of people already made up their minds early on, and so you have to target folks early on. You got to make sure you get your mail out early on. So even though I won most of the votes that came in later, I wasn't able to get the early votes. And some of those folks, I actually, you know, met them in the community, said, oh, we already voted. And then I said, well, you know, I might run in the future. Can I talk to you? And they said, had you come earlier, we would have voted for you. So you got to make sure you got to reach people early, you got to reach them fast, and make sure you get your mail out there early, so you can at least slow it down, so they can say, okay, well, you know what? I need to give this a little more thought before them just casting their ballot in. So make sure you start early.
Good point there in regards to you are the face. I mean, if you are the candidate, you are the face out there. So the voters want to meet you. So just out of curiosity, how many pairs of shoes did you go through walking?
You know, I bought my first pair of running shoes in like thinking a decade, and man, no matter what you're wearing, if you're even wearing, you know, slacks, you still got to wear your running shoes because you're going to walk miles a day. And I used to go until, I used to push it a little bit. You know, sun sets, it's getting a little dark. People are like, you know, you should probably go home now. But, you know, if I saw a neighbor out, their lights are on or they're in front of their house, I'll take every chance to talk to someone. And so you're going to have to walk quite a bit. And like I said, you got to talk to your family because one of the challenges is that make sure that your family's on board. Because, you know, with 2 young children, the twins weren't born yet, I had to walk and for hours at a time, and so wasn't there to help the family. So you got to make sure you got to find the way to balance that out.
Fantastic. And how about you, Mr. Warren? What mistakes, if there were any, in your campaign, and what lessons did you learn from them?
Sure. Well, you know, I think in politics, I mean, you really can take nothing for granted. You know, and that was one of the things that I learned early on is that, you know, once you put your name into the hat to be elected as an elected official, people start to look at you a little differently. People start to ask you questions that you may have never had to answer before with them. People who you think will support you may not support you, but then there are others who you may not have known or would have thought they would have supported you that show up and support you. And so, I think, as I look back, I can really unequivocally state that politics, if it were a sport, it would be the most physical sport that any of us could ever play. More physical than football, more physical than MMA fighting. It is a very difficult journey. And for those of you that are interested in politics, you really have to understand why you're doing it, because people will try to push you to either side, and whatever decision you make, there's always going to be people on the other side. And that was one of the things I had not considered when I was running for public office. I thought you could make a good decision based on all the information, and then everybody would agree. But that's not always the case.
Thank you. You brought up some really great points there. You mentioned the physical, but then there's also that emotional aspect of being part of the campaign as well. We all know that with campaigns, financial is a big prong of it, but the emotional aspect of it as well. And I think you brought up some really good points there, Mr. Warren.
Yeah, emotionally, it's a huge investment. And so, this is not for the meek at heart. There are going to be, as I heard others say on the previous panel, there are going to be good days and bad days. But this is about staying the course and being true to yourself. And ultimately, win or lose, then you can sleep and live with yourself. It's very important that your constitution remains stable. And so I was always very secure in that. But I did not know that, as Bassem said, you really got to get out and touch people. Because most of us have never had to go and walk on doors and meet strangers and then try to, in 10 seconds, tell somebody who you are and why you're running. And that is a very different experience for most of us.
Wonderful. I just have one quick question here, and then we're going to wrap it up with this panel. Mr. Lee, one final question here is, what advice that you can provide to our audience out there in regards to running for office?
The one thing that I certainly want you young people to internalize is, if you believe in something, do it. The moment that you declare your candidacy, as Vice Mayor Alan Warren has said, those that you think will support you may not. And those that you least expect it will turn out and support you. And when you start identifying with the core values and truly believing in making a difference in the community, that's when you're going to stand out. And for each and every one of you who are on the fence, who are considering it, consider me a resource. I am readily available to consult with you at no cost, because I truly believe that the only way we can actually achieve something significant is that each and every one of our communities work together.
Thank you so much there. Please, let's give a warm round of applause for our three panelists.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our Breaking New Barriers panel, moderated by Ms. Pamela Wu.
Good afternoon. Thanks once again for joining us. I'm Pamela Wu, Director of Marketing and Communications for UC Davis School of Law and contributing host of Insight on Capital Public Radio here in Sacramento. My thanks to APAPA and to CCN for organizing yet another invaluable forum and for the opportunity to participate in the discussion. Your involvement in forums like this give your community a voice in public service. It can break barriers. And that brings us to the title of our next panel discussion, Breaking New Barriers Running for Office. I am very pleased to welcome today's panelists. Please welcome Assemblyman David Chiu, Democrat representing San Francisco. Assemblyman Devin Mathis, Republican representing Inyo and parts of Tulare and Kern counties. Assemblyman Evan Lowe, Democrat representing parts of the South Bay, most notably Silicon Valley. And Assemblymember Ling Chang, Republican whose district encompasses parts of Los Angeles, Orange, and San Bernardino counties. I'd like to thank all of you for participating in this very important discussion today. As I mentioned, this talk is about breaking new barriers. And so I'd like to start by asking, who or what inspired you to run for office? Assemblyman Chiu, I'll start with you.
Thank you so much, Pamela. First of all, good afternoon, APAPA. How are we doing today? I have to say that, and I think this is probably the case for all of my elected colleagues here on stage, it wasn't just a few years ago that there wouldn't be a room of this size of Asian Americans coming together to talk about political mobilization. And in fact, 15 years ago when I started as an activist in my city of San Francisco, we were at a time when there were hardly any Asian Americans who were elected to office. There were very few who were actually running for office, and we didn't have a lot of role models or mentors. And I want to just say that I think for many of us, what APAPA is doing here, what CC and the APAPA board are doing, are really moving us forward in dramatic ways. But for me, many of my role models early on were civil rights activists. I'm a former civil rights attorney, and as someone who in college studied Martin Luther King and what the African American community did to move our entire civil rights agenda forward, moving to San Francisco and California, and learning about the story and the fight of the International Hotel, the fight of Filipino-American civil rights and labor leaders in the farm workers movement. That is what really inspired me early on.
Assemblyman Mathis. The same question to you. Who or what inspired you to run for office?
Well, for me in particular, I served 2 tours in Iraq. And when I got home, it was 2008, and we were in the middle of the crash. And I just kind of looked around and I went, you know, we're hearing all this, our children and our grandchildren are going to bear the burden. And I'm going, wait a minute, I am one of those children, and my kids are the grandkids. We've got to stand up and we've got to do something, and we've got to take our state and our country back and go do something and get involved, because if we don't, I mean, it's our future's at stake. And, you know, just everybody being out here showing that involvement, that's what it's all about.
Thank you very much. Assemblyman Lowe, I'll ask you too, who or what inspired you to run for office? And also, what barriers do you think you overcame or ran into when you ran for office?
Well, I think when I ran for office, I was 20 years old. And at the time, there were not number and the prevalence of strong leaders representing the Asia Pacific Islander community, and it was incumbent upon us and the generations, particularly the younger generations, to take on that helm and follow in the footsteps of those that have come before us. And what I think is so reflective and representative of this panel here today is the younger representation of public servants. Typically, in the Asian community, just as my father's an optometrist, my uncle's an orthodontist, they said you should become a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. And so I'm a bad Chinese son because I was not any of those things. But you see the importance of civic engagement and duty, and I think what's so important is you see a cross-section of generations of ethnic communities now standing up to that call of duty.
Assemblywoman Chang, I'll pose the same two questions to you, in fact. Who or what inspired you to run for office, and what barriers do you think you feel you overcame in doing so?
So a lot of people have probably heard this story quite a few times. I actually fell into politics completely by accident. I used to think that politicians are slimy and sleazy, which some are. But I was fortunate enough to meet some really good people who were encouraging me to run for office. And my first elected seat was to the Water Board, and I unseated a 21-year incumbent and became the first woman to serve on that Water Board in its 50 years of existence at that time. But I overcame a lot because I was a young Asian American woman in my 20s. When I was campaigning, people looked at me and thought, oh, this is so cute. You know, she thinks she can unseat a 21-year incumbent. She has no idea what she's doing, what she thinks she can do. And also with my name, Ling Ling Chang. When people look at my name, they assume that I can't speak English. They weren't sure if I'm a man or a woman. I actually did knock on a door, and this family said, oh, you settled a family bet because we weren't sure if Ling Ling's a man or a woman.
Wow.
So it was imperative that I campaigned door to door. But you know, ultimately, at the end of the day, I think if you do your homework and you work hard and you devote the time and you are in it for the right reasons, you will succeed being a public servant. And I will say, with my interactions with APAPA, my first panel was serving on the APAPA panel as a water board member back in 2005, so it was many years ago. And thank you, CC, for supporting the cause and encouraging the API community to come out and be active in politics and the community.
I think that's really fascinating to me and to a lot of the people here in the audience, that you encountered social barriers, if you will, that were both overt and kind of implicit at the same time. Let me ask, what you think is the most important lesson? This question I'll pose to all four of you. What do you think is the most important lesson that you've learned through your experiences running for office? Assemblyman Chu?
I think the first most important thing is just the importance of service, of having the opportunity to work and build community. In San Francisco, I live about a dozen blocks from San Francisco's Chinatown, which is not just the oldest Chinatown in the country, but it is a community that has tremendous need. We have some of the poorest residents of San Francisco. We have thousands of first-generation Chinese immigrants who are living 3, 4, 5 to a room that might be 10 by 15 feet. And the average income is less than $15,000 a year. And for many of us, and I think this is probably all of us in this room, who've had the opportunity, the opportunities that we have here in this country, it's so important for us to give back. And what was important for me was to have the opportunity to work with activists, to work with community leaders, to move forward our Asian American community. And when I first decided to run, now some 7 years ago, for the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, Chinatown had never been represented by someone who looked like us in the 160-year history of San Francisco's Chinatown and of our city itself. And to have the opportunity to work and build bridges with so many of you here in this room, and also, another thing I'll just mention, the importance of building coalitions across diverse communities with our African American, our Latino, our white, our LGBT, our intergenerational leaders is just something that I know APAPA takes very seriously, and something that I know all of us here on the stage takes very seriously as well.
Assemblyman Mathis, what important lesson did you take away from running for office?
Just the ability to bring people together. In my race, I had because California has a top 2 election, which is great for all the voters because you guys really get to pick, hey, who's the best person? Mm-hmm. And for me, I wasn't the top guy out. I was the second guy, and just barely by a narrow margin. And I had to go around and really work with different people and bring them together as one to get my numbers up, to get my name out there. And, you know, one of the biggest things I always think about, and before, you know, running, I was very big with veterans advocacy. And, you know, you always hear, you know, that's this person's baby. This is their idea. And people hold that idea very close and they don't want to let it go. But then there's also the saying that it takes a village to raise a child. And when we come together and we bring different communities together, we can raise that idea and we can come together and do great things. And, you know, we're doing it here today with APAVA's help and with this group and all the sponsors that are out here. And just that challenge, though, because it is such a challenge because everybody has their own unique idea and their own unique perspective. But when you do come together like we are here today, great things happen.
Assemblyman Lowe, important lessons that you've taken away from running for office?
Sure. Well, let me ask the audiences a question. In terms of occupations, positive or negative connotations? Doctor, positive or negative? Positive.
Positive.
If you said firefighter, positive or negative?
Positive.
If I said teacher, positive or negative? If I said politician, positive or negative?
Positive. Positive.
So you think all of us are bad people, huh? The reason why I asked this question, I want to be abundantly clear, is in terms of the question, which was, what is the lesson that we've learned? And particularly for me, the important lesson is to be authentic in the face of relentless scrutiny. You know, too often times you'll see that politicians will try to pander or they'll make promises that they can't keep. But it's so important to maintain to our core and what we fundamentally believe, and I'm hopeful that when we maintain a level of authenticity, that we will make sure that people will understand why we believe in an issue and to maintain to our core and our values.
How hard is that? That's obviously a message that really resonates with the audience and with voters too. For someone who is an office holder, how hard is that to maintain in the face of things like poll numbers and focus groups and consultants?
Go ahead, Ling. It is part of the democratic process. When my Chinese grandmother reads the World Journal Tsingtao paper, she says, "Oh my gosh, they're saying bad things about you." And of course, what's important to be able to understand is that this is the democratic process, and it's expected, and it's important for all of us to collectively to hold us accountable. Hold our elected officials accountable to making sure that we are serving in the public interest. And when you have the lowest voter turnout in the November 2014 elections, individuals in California are abrogating their responsibilities to hold us accountable. So what's important is that we understand this is the role that we have ahead of us, but to understand that we are looking for solutions. And so it's fair game to understand that we are going to be criticized or held accountable, but how do we then understand that this is a position that individuals hold, but then collectively, Republican, you see it clearly here right today, up on this panel, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, finding out solutions to talk about the importance of civic engagement.
I think we have fans of bipartisanship and authenticity in the audience as well. Thank you very much for that well thought out answer. Assemblywoman Chang, lessons that you've learned through your experiences running for office?
So I was just saying to Assemblymember Lowe, man, he just took my answer. I was thinking authenticity the whole entire time, particularly, you know, coming from a place where I thought that politicians are slimy and sleazy. You know, I thought that authenticity is key. And frankly, I am an immigrant. I came to the States when I was 3, and I can speak Chinese and Mandarin and Taiwanese. And I'm a Republican, so it's a pleasure to be able to represent the Chinese-Taiwanese community in elected office, but also, you know, coupling that with being authentic and making sure that you don't make any empty promises, what's realistic and what's not. A lot of politicians tend to pander to, you know, what the polls say, but what I've seen this year, and to be completely honest, and I've been saying this meeting after meeting, getting to know the freshman class, which we are all part of, everyone is intelligent, thoughtful, pragmatic, authentic. And that was incredibly refreshing, and that's reflective in the legislation that we passed this year. And I have to say that I am very optimistic that California is going to be moving in a positive direction, and we're moving California forward with great folks like these three up here. And you see a lot of bipartisan collaboration, which, this should be a model for the rest of the nation, frankly.
I think a lot of us like what we're seeing right here on the couches, in fact. For our next question, just so that you're not always, Assemblyman Chu, the first one to answer each question, we'll make sure that everyone has an opportunity to answer, but I'm going to pose this question to you first, Assemblyman Mathis. Which of your background experiences do you feel was most important or helpful in running a campaign and getting elected?
See, that one's very easy for me. I was an Army sergeant for 10 years. And with the war in Iraq, we trained on counterinsurgency tactics. And I talked to, where's Jacob at? A young man here who was a Marine. And, he was asking me the same question. And I asked him, I go, what are counterinsurgency tactics? What are we doing overseas? And it's winning hearts and minds, going door to door and talking to people and letting them know, hey, we're here to help you. How many people out here have heard that saying, hi, we're here from the government and we're here to help?
Yeah.
And everybody sees that as a bad thing. It's a scary thing. But our job is to actually be here to help. And, I joke about it back home, and when I do town halls, I'm like, my job, our thing in the office is to be there to help. It's a customer service, and we provide the service of government. And that's how it truly needs to be. But for me, the best thing was, the time in the military, because I knew what it was to get up early, to work hard, to work against opposition, and just go out there and get it done. My district's very large. It's, Tulare County. I cover all of Inyo County and even part of Kern County. And to drive from Visalia around to Bishop is about a 5 to 6 hour drive, depending on traffic. And I walked precincts everywhere. And there was a lot of people that went, what are you doing in Inyo County walking precincts? They're only 1.8% of your overall vote. And I go, well, they're constituents too. They're people. They deserve to be represented. And so I went and I talked to them, and I still make an effort to go out to my other areas and talk to people.
Were they surprised to see you?
Oh, they love it. They absolutely love it. And they come out, and we have little town halls and do things with the chambers there and meet with them. I actually have artwork from Inyo County. And for those of you who don't know, I cover the highest and lowest part because I have Mount Whitney and Death Valley in my district. So it's a lot of fun. But no, it just, that whole time in the military, going into the office, running, looking at it, looking at the leadership stuff, learning how to bring people together, it was super important. I've got the 30-second sign, so I'll cut it now. Just one thing, for military, you have a group of people that are thrown together from all over everywhere with multiple backgrounds, and you've got to get together and work and make it work, and that's what we do.
Assemblymember Lowe, which of your background experiences was most critical or helpful in getting you where you are today?
One aspect is that I lost my first election back in 2004. I ran for office when I was 21 years old. And particularly for the Asian and Chinese community, we like to have a good public face. Mm-hmm. Everyone, we're successful. You don't talk about failures. And one thing that I really attribute to the experience to where I am today is to learn from failure. And the region I represent is Silicon Valley, so you have a lot of startups. And part of the innovation and economy and the mentality is to put it yourself out and identify risk. Risk is important, risk and reward. And so how do you then look back and say, there are opportunities and we need to take risks, take a look at opportunities, and try to find out what you can learn from that, because certainly it builds character. And so I'd encourage particularly any young person and or individuals who are young at heart to further look at the opportunity of risk, because I think it's important that we put ourselves out there. And oftentimes culturally, we like to stay within the box and we don't like to draw outside of the lines. But it's important to be able to take a look at that. And I think that's the future of where we're headed.
Great advice. Assemblywoman Chang, which of your background experiences was most valuable?
So I have a pretty diverse background. I was in the corporate sector as a project manager for a health information systems company, so in the tech industry. And then most recently I ran a science education center for kids for the past 9 years. But I was also elected like I said, local water agency in 2005, then to the Diamond Bar City Council in 2009, served as mayor of Diamond Bar in 2011, and then now I'm in the assembly. So it's, I would have to say that a person's experiences will always be beneficial to what you bring to the table up here in Sacramento, because diversity is really key. I think it encourages a lot of collaboration in understanding each other's positions and kind of their experiences and making sure that every voice is heard. And I think that we do see that here in Sacramento. But I will stress that those with local government experience, because we all tend to, when you're in local government, you don't really think about partisanship. You just think about the issues that you need to focus on. And a lot of folks in this class came from local government, so you'll see a lot of focus on just the issues, and I appreciate that, frankly. You know, I've always been a policy wonk, and you see a lot of focus on policy rather than partisan politics, and that's really encouraging for me.
Assemblyman Hsu, valuable background experiences?
So first of all, I would agree with Ling. Many of us who are on the stage, we were all local government officials before we got to the State Assembly. And as the former president of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, that was an incredible training ground for me to do what we all do together at the state level. But I would say for me, there were two parts of my background that were, or have been really formative of how I do the work that I do. First, I am an attorney by background. I worked as a civil rights attorney and as a criminal prosecutor. And that background not only taught me how to advocate, because we always have to advocate with each other and with the public on what it is that we want, but those are experiences that taught me who it is that I fight for. Years ago, I had clients who were Asian immigrants who were being kicked out of housing in my city, in our state. I worked with crime victims, a Filipino woman who had been abused by their husbands. I worked with activists here in this room advocating for healthcare, advocating for civil rights, and that's an important part of my background. But I would also say, like many of you here in this room, I did spend a number of years, 9 years, running a small business. And that experience, for those of you who come from business backgrounds, is important not just to managing winning campaigns, but to understanding how government ought to run, learning how to balance difficult budgets, making those difficult choices that you do when you're trying to keep your business afloat and thriving, when you're trying to figure out how to succeed and create jobs. I think for those of you who have business backgrounds, that is a really important aspect of, I think, the experiences of many Asian Americans and what they bring to an elected office.
For our next question, I'll begin with Assemblyman Lowe. What inspires you to vote for a candidate when you're the voter?
Let's see here. I think what's important is when we take a look at candidates, as I mentioned, what do I look for in myself? And again, so I taught American government at a community college, and there's a sense of a delegate versus a trustee. Do you want to entrust in your elected representative that you know they will make the right decision, but you won't always agree with them? Or do you delegate to them such that they will vote according to what their district wants to vote? And so there's a difference of opinion in terms of delegate versus trustee, and at which times does that elected official act as a trustee or act as a delegate. And so what I think is important is, for me, that I know where a person stands in terms of their core values and their life experiences. And so when I see someone who is authentic, if I see someone who is at the farmer's market just as I am, or in the streets out with their communities, I think that level of authenticity is something that is tremendously valued, because to get outside of the normal average day, how do you get exposed to local elected officials and our state officials? You see what you see on TV, but that's behind the facade of a lot of the smoke and mirrors, so to speak. And so what I think is important, again, is which individual, in terms of making that assessment, can vote and encompass what they truly believe.
Assemblymember Chang, what inspires you to vote for a candidate?
So I would have to agree with Assemblymember Lowe, authenticity. But also, I want to also focus on a candidate's willingness to work hard. I think that's really important. And what I would like to encourage everyone out here to do, and not a lot of people do it, but I would encourage you all to do your own homework and research on candidates, because you shouldn't just hear like 3 bullet points. You should really do your homework on candidates, and that's what I do. And I would take the time to sit down and actually have conversations with them. I don't want to see any more, frankly, this is probably a wish of mine. I don't want to see any more candidates who are just in this for ego. I want to see that they're in it for the right reasons, that they really, truly want to make a difference. That is my wish, you know, because we've all sacrificed so much to be here. And frankly, we work very, very hard. You know, I don't really have a life outside of this work. But I love it because, you know, I feel like we're really moving the ball forward. I just don't want to see any more people coming up here, you know, for ego's sake, for just the title, just the name. And I think we're moving in the right direction. So I think that if I can leave one thing with you all is to just, you know, do your own research. You know, don't just pay attention to what one campaign throws at the other, but just do your own research.
Assemblymember Chu, how do you decide how you're going to vote when you're the voter?
So all of us who are elected officials, along with the APABA board, we've all probably spent a lot of time analyzing candidates. And in addition to what Evan and Ling Ling were just mentioning, your record in the community, your experience, your ability to connect with voters and to be genuine, these are all important things. I think I would add 2 more things to that. First of all, asking the question of why someone wants to run for office. And it's not just about what's the fire in your belly, but what motivates you to do the hard work that we're talking about. Because we all know elected officials who we just don't know why they're in office. We're not sure why they vote the way they do. We don't know what they're passionate about or who they are fighting for. So I think that's important. And then another thing that I look for often, actually always, is a real sense of integrity, a real sense of ethics. Because our community, we have been burned by some elected officials who had the trust of the community, who ultimately did not live up to that trust. In fact, every ethnic community in the state of California in recent years has seen too many examples of corruption, too many examples of a lack of ethics. And I think it's something we need to really grapple with as a community to make sure that our leaders are ones that have really the highest standards of virtue, because to be given that trust is an awesome responsibility, and we have to make sure that we hold ourselves to that. But let me close just by saying, I do hope out of this conversation, we haven't scared those of you in this room off who are thinking about running for office.
We'll talk about that next.
We are all looking for that next generation of leaders. At some point, we're all going to be termed out of office, and we need to see the next generation of leaders really moving our cities, our counties, and our state forward.
Same question to you, Assemblymember Mathis. What inspires you to vote for a candidate?
All of the above. You know, my colleagues here pretty much nailed it. I mean, you've got to look at the ethics, and for me, really, I look at how much somebody's willing to work for it. And we see a lot of people, and we're starting to see a lot of really crowded races now where there's, you know, instead of 2 or 3 candidates, there's 7, there's 8, there's 12. Who's willing to actually go out and do the work? Who really cares enough to spend their time? You know, for us, we're state assembly members. We spend 9 months out of the year in Sacramento. You know, Monday through Thursday into Friday. That's a lot of time. It's a lot of time away from home. It's how supportive is their spouse? How supportive is their family? Who do they have backing them? Who are they working with? Who are they working for? You know, we see, you know, David said it. There's some people that are in office where you just sit there and you go, what is this person doing here? And then you see other people that are out there that are working constantly to get things done, and we need those people. So those of you who are out there who are thinking about it, who are contemplating it, think about how much you're willing to work for it and how bad you want it. It's kind of that, when you train for something and you're at the end and you're really, really tired, do you give it your all, or do you give up because you got a side ache at the end of the race? You know, which candidate's going to do that? You know, everybody's always asking, you know, with all the presidential candidates, you know, which presidential candidate do you like? And I think about it, and it's, well, who do we want in this spot? Who's going to do what we trust them to do? You know, Evan nailed it with, you know, are they going to be the valued base, I know I can trust this guy? Or are they going to vote their district? Are they going to sit down and talk to everybody and all the stakeholders? You know, one of the things I pride myself on is working in a bipartisan manner and getting everybody's input together. And I like to see other people that do that. And that's one of the things I look for personally is who's the guy that's going to sit down and have the conversation, even if they know they're not going to agree with the person, who's willing to sit down and have those hard conversations and talk it out and come up with sound policy.
That answer segues perfectly into our final question of the panel. And that is, what would you say to the younger generations who might be in our audience who are thinking about running for office? And I'll begin with you, Assemblywoman Shea.
Well, I do have a particular message for the younger women out there, is to encourage them to run. Just do it. I was fortunate enough to be approached by even middle school aged girls when I was mayor of Diamond Bar asking me for internships because they'll say, we didn't know someone like you could be in this office. And particularly, I don't want to get all partisan, but because I'm Republican, I would go and speak to colleges and universities on panels about, you know, political engagement. And I'd ask the class, when you look at me, do you think I'm Republican or Democrat? And 97% would think that I'm Democrat. And
Assemblyman Chu, your advice to young people who might be thinking about running for elected office?
So my first advice, if you are young at the beginning of your career and you're thinking about doing the kind of jobs that we're in, get involved. Start volunteering, get on to a nonprofit board, get involved in a campaign, approach those of us who are elected officials because we have all mentored young folks who want to move forward. And to build on Ling Ling's point, we can use so much more API leadership in our state. And the opportunities we have to expand our leadership when it comes to the diversity of Asian American leadership, the gender of Asian American leadership, as well as really the generational leadership that we can see reflected in this room is so important. I will also say we do have a special opportunity, I think, in 2016 at the state level. And for those of you who may be in the middle of your careers thinking about moving things forward, we have an opportunity in the state legislature in the next year to elect the highest number of Asian Americans that we have ever had if we are smart. And the reason 2016 is so important is with new top 2 rules as well as the new 12-year terms, Next year is really the last year for about 8 to 10 years where we will be able to elect a new generation of leaders to our state legislature. And not to get partisan for a moment, let me just state a fact. We have a record number of APIs in the state legislature. There are 12 of us. 3 happen to be Republican. 9 happen to be Democrats. But putting that aside, what's important for all of us who are here is that we work together to move our community forward. And in parts of the state that are more conservative, seeing great Asian Republican candidates succeed is important. In parts of the state that are more liberal, seeing great Asian Democrats succeed is important. That is how we thrive. And the opportunity that we have to work in a bipartisan nature, this is how we lead and this is how we succeed. And so I just want to thank APABA for really convening this, bringing us together in this bipartisan way. And I look forward to electing some of you here in this room in the coming years. Thank you.
Assemblyman Mathis, your advice to potential future candidates?
Don't be scared. There was a point in my race where I was terrified, where nobody would return a phone call. But if you live in the Central Valley in July, everybody leaves because it's over 110. So keep calling people. Get out there and do it. I mean, our generation and the future generation, you know, we always talk about, like, what's the next update on my iPhone? What's the next this? Well, be the next. Get out there and do it. If you have one person that tells you no and another person that tells you no, well, go talk to somebody else. Because you can do it. The ability that you have is there. The only thing, some of the best advice, life advice I've ever gotten, is that the only person that's stopping you is yourself. And that decision is yours. Whether you're going to do your homework, whether you're going to show up on time for your test, everything you do in life is your choice. You make that decision and make that choice, and don't be afraid to do it. And other people will gravitate to you and will be inspired by you getting out and doing it. Every one of you has the opportunity to do that and to run for office if you make that choice.
And Assemblyman Lowe has the final word on the panel. Your advice for future candidates?
Particularly for young candidates, imagine this, that the California American dream is it still attainable? I live in an area of San Jose in which one needs to earn $170,000 to afford a single-family home in my community. And I, as the former mayor of Campbell, and I, as a state legislator, I cannot even afford a single-family home in